Okay, call this meeting to order. And item number 2 is our flag salute. So if you stand with me and repeat the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's not on the agenda, but we have our newly elected District 1 County Commissioner here, and I'd like to introduce him and maybe do a round robin, and everybody's here. Marvin, could you introduce yourself?
I think you just did. I'm Marvin Goodman. I'm newly elected District 1 Commissioner.
Mark Stradlin, Mayor.
Meg Morgan with the Guthrie City. Carol Piper, First Deputy to the Assessor's Office.
Kay Wade, Logan County Economic Development.
Dan McMahon.
And maybe
Tech Major, Meridian Technology Center.
Barry Anderson, F&M Bank.
Mike Simpson, Guthrie Public Schools.
Jeff Chappell, citizen on the board.
Tim Nav.
Jason Smith, Administrator of the Health Department.
excellent. And of course, we have our Troy Cole here. She's going to be taking minutes. All right. Now, item number 3 is consideration and possible action on approving minutes of April 16th, 2014 and June 19th, 2014.
As I reviewed those, the only question I had on them is there's a page number at the top that doesn't start at 1, which kind of...
That was from March.
Okay.
That ran the numbers consecutively through the time.
Okay, as long
So
as
the
it's
first...
not confusing that people think that there was something ahead of those when it starts at 3 and 6. So, just for clarification. Other than that, I move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? No opposition? Then the motion carries. All right. Number 4, presentation and discussion regarding a project plan relating to Increment District Number 1, Logan County, Oklahoma, East Side Commercial Increment District.
You need to do this one.
Oh, well, we didn't. I was saying both of them. No?
Both minutes, yes. Both sets of minutes.
Was that for both minutes?
Sure.
Can we do that all right? Okay, yes. So number 4, we have Dan McMahon.
Commissioner, thank you. Let me get over at the end. Does everybody have a copy of what was sent out last night? If not, I have a copy for you.
I don't either.
Could you throw a copy at me, please?
Sure. This is exactly what was sent out last night. So. Sure. This bears some resemblance to what we talked about at the last meeting. I think we, for the most part, have stayed true to the bones of the last draft of this. I would point out a few things that are different from today's draft and the one you saw at our last meeting. First, we have a slightly different district size than we did at the last meeting. And this is a suggestion that your chairman made, and I think it was a good suggestion to include within the boundaries of the increment district the tract in section 11, that's the northwest quarter of section 11, because we certainly have the potential to serve that area with the sewer extension that's being constructed pursuant to this plan. And so any area that might benefit from these improvements, to to me, it makes sense that they might also be able to contribute. And of course, we're not adding to the project, we're just adding to the increment district size. Which means that if some improvements are made, whether or not they rely on the sewer line extension, they will serve to pay off this district quicker. In other words, the district will go away quicker than what we have it planned. So we're not taking any more money. The dollars are the same. It's just by including this area, you have the opportunity to have the debt paid quicker and the district terminates sooner. And I think that was something that everybody expressed an interest in at the last meeting. We also have, as the Appendix B, the boundaries of the project area. Project area is oftentimes different from the increment district area because that's the area in which all of the projects are going to be done. And in this case, we have two projects that have been listed. One, the sewer line extension, and also the improvements to North Midwest Boulevard. And that's not something that we've talked a lot about, but that is Love's intention is to improve North Midwest Boulevard. Now, as we talked about last time, we're not giving them any money for that, because I think what we've all had discussed is that we're defraying a third of the cost of the sewer line extension. That's the $150,000. So we're not giving them a third of the cost of North Midwest Boulevard. But it's important, I think, in this exercise to recognize all of the public costs of this project. Project being broadly defined as the construction and operation of a Love's convenience store on the east side of I-35. So those two public improvements have to be done in order for Love's to have the infrastructure they need to go forward with their project. And they're willing to pay the cost of those for the most part, asking only for a third of the cost on the sewer line from this entity and then a third of the cost, I think, from the city as well, pursuant to discussions between Love's and the city. So that has not changed. Still talking about $150,000 to Love's for purposes of getting the sewer line extension underneath I-35. And then at the same time, that sewer line extension will be done in a manner that will serve the public, not just Love's, but the public, other members, other developers, other homeowners will have the opportunity to connect to that sewer line. So we're not building a private sewer line. We're helping pay a portion of the cost of a public sewer line. And of course, Love's won't be the only people that will be able to drive up and down North Midwest Boulevard. That would be open to the public as well. So all of these improvements that we've talked about in this plan are benefiting the public, but they are being done by Love's primarily, I think, to help with keep the construction schedule on track for Love's. They will have to open at a specified time. They have commitments that they make to third parties to have their facilities open on a certain date. They want the ability to control that construction schedule. Obviously, if there was a public contract let on that and for whatever reason a delay, that would prevent Love's from opening in a timely manner. And that's not uncommon in my experience, where you have developers who are making third-party commitments or companies that are making third-party commitments that they need to keep to be able to do these improvements themselves, even though they're considered public improvements, and in this case, mostly on a public right-of-way. I think we fixed the numbers in the project plan. We had a couple of typos last time. Did everybody get a chance to look at the spreadsheet? Probably had the chance and preferred not to, but the spreadsheet tells the tale, if you will. Let me hand out spreadsheets to anyone who may need those this morning. It simply summarizes the revenue stream that we think will be materializing as a result of, does anybody need another one? Does anybody like one? It was, yeah, let me pull those apart. It was one of the conditions that we were working under is to try to make this district no more than a 5-year district. And I believe we've done that. I like to phrase it as that there's no more than a 5-year capture period. And I believe, in essence, that's the case, although you have to understand that the timing on ad valorem revenues is a bit of a lag. You've got Love's going out there, acquiring the property this year, starting construction this year, but not finishing construction until next year. So the improvements won't be assessed until sometime in 2015 after completion of the convenience store. Now the increase in value associated with the purchase by Love will be reflected upon the recording of the deed. And that's happened. And Carol has been good enough to help me with the numbers on that. So that is a slight increase in the ad valorem taxes that have been paid in the past on that tract. Certainly much less than what we would anticipate after the improvements, but nonetheless something more than has been paid in the past. And that increase, which we show on the spreadsheet to be approximately $14,000 for tax year 2015, because that's the first tax year that will go on the books for, is incremental. In other words, in addition to what has been paid in the past. Now that is the only exception to my 5-year capture period. We necessarily, well, we don't have to do it that way, but that is not, the 5-year capture period that I was working with was the capture period on the improvements, the 5 to 7 to 10 million, whatever Love's winds up spending out there. And so under this spreadsheet, you can see for the next 6 years following the first year, the 5 years after that, that is our 5-year capture period. If you go into the middle column, it says total increment revenues available for debt service. That's six years, but the first one is just the unimproved property, generating $14,000 approximately in incremental revenues simply because of the increase in the market value. The fact that it was on the tax rolls for a lesser amount than what Love's paid for the acquisition of it. Then we just do a simple debt service calculation. We're presuming one payment a year, 5%. We have approximately $37,000 in interest. We will repay the $150,000 plus the organizational costs associated with this exercise of $20,000 plus approximately $9,500 in cost of issuance. So that total principal amount of $180,000 is being amortized over a 5-year period. And I think when you look at the last column, you'll see we come out with about $10,000 plan, any excess revenue is to go to prepay that note. And I did not do the calculations, but you could see we could wind up getting that note paid off at least a year early, and maybe a couple of years early if there's some other improvements going on in the district. With regard to the convenience store that's already opened out there, this is an item we discussed at the last meeting, whether those improvements would generate incremental revenues. I told you at the time that that was up to the county assessor. It's still up to the county assessor. I don't want to prejudge what the county assessor may choose to do on that. So that has not been included, that's not been factored into my numbers. If by chance county assessor decides that that can go in the incremental portion, then this will obviously pay off quicker again because of the additional revenues. So this, in that regard, is kind of the worst case scenario. It's kind of, this assumes that maybe only Love's is the only thing that's going to contribute increment revenues, which I don't think is a really realistic assumption. But if that were the case, it would still pay off. It would still debt service the amount of the financing. And that is my goal. Whenever I put one of these together, I want to do the numbers where they work, where the thing's going to be able to pay for itself. And so I'm very satisfied this morning that the numbers work out as well as they do, and we have some excess revenues, in fact, that we can hopefully use to pay off this thing a little early. Let me stop there. I've covered quite a bit of ground. Let me stop there and see if anyone has any questions about how the numbers work here.
Well, it looks like it's going to get paid off quite a bit earlier than what you have up here. So it looks like you just have about, what, 3 years that just the Love's improvements is going to be able to pay.
Well, the debt service will be about $42,000 a year.
Oh, okay.
And so we'll have increment revenues of about $55,000. We always have some administrative expenses, and $5,000 is a kind of a plug figure. We always use at least $5,000 in case the commissioners or the trustees of the authority need to pay us some accountants or some lawyers or some engineers to go out there and do some work with regard to the district. If we don't need that, then that's some additional revenue that could be applied to the back end of the financing, and that would generate a little bit of prepayment as well. But I think what you'll find is that this area is going to be a very popular one in the next few years, and that this district will easily pay the financed amount within the 5-year capture period that we're talking about. Be very surprised if that weren't the case, Doug.
I have a question about conflict of interest.
Yes, sir.
If someone owns property inside our proposed district limits, is that a conflict of interest? On
Yeah.
our board?
On your board, on
this board.
On this board,
Yes.
there is a statutory provision that
Makes
deals
that-
with that. Yes.
Okay. In that case, we're probably going to have to realign that property and make that.
Yes,
Do you own property in there?
to bring that up, right next door to me, as I looked at the
Oh,
plan,
I see.
Dan,
They're on the south side of 33? Okay.
Right there, across from the water tower.
I'm sorry, Dan. I think we're gonna have to redraw that to just Highway 33 right there on that half mile.
I guess I was a little surprised to see that addition after we had so much discussion at our last meeting about the
Correct.
capture area. And then when we got this document that entire east section was added.
Then if it's the pleasure of the board, we can just move that over to Midwest. I'll tell you what inspired me on that was that I had a gentleman who already has a convenience store gas station, and that piece of property there, that's that triangle on the north side of 33, he's interested in seeing if he can obtain that, because he figures, yes, we're going to have some serious growth here. And so I thought that, knowing the lady that owns that property, I thought it would be good to include that. So when I did that, I just told Dan, I said, hey, just move it over half a mile. Not thinking that Tim's on there and did not know that you were on there. So is that going to put a big hitch in this?
No, we can easily redo that property description to follow the east boundary line of section 10 and take out the northwest quarter of section 11, which I think is what you're talking about. So, well,
When we talked at the last meeting, we were gonna go down Midwest Boulevard all the way to College.
That's true.
And that was gonna be the east boundary.
That's true.
We're gonna come here, and it's gonna be this boundary right
So we were looking at, what I was looking at was including this piece of property in order to be able to say that bond off a little quicker. There's not gonna be any, like Dan said, there's not gonna be any decrease in the income.
Right, and I guess I understand the fact that the
Sure.
first development, it does pay off faster and it's the same amount.
Sure.
I guess my challenge is more process, because this committee met and talked
Yes,
for
we
quite
did.
a while about what those boundaries would be, agreed upon it, but then the draft came back with a different than what we had agreed about as a committee.
Mhm.
And so that was just
Oh.
a process issue that I was challenged with.
Yeah, it was just meant as my suggestion. It wasn't meant to be that we're forcing some kind of district change. So if we want to continue with the same district that we originally, here at this last meeting, came up with, there's not a problem. But this is kind of like an amendment to that, and if we want to accept it, we could, and if we don't, we can go back to that original.
Does that require you refiguring all the numbers?
no, the numbers shouldn't change, because we're still including the left side, if we take out that quarter section. As I say,
On the payback.
my spreadsheet doesn't include any of the potential growth that might happen in that northwest quarter, simply because I don't know of any plans that
Okay.
anyone has at this point to do that. Now,
That would have just been bonus. That's,
That
yeah,
would've
that's
been
kind of what we
bonus.
talked about, yeah.
yeah, it just would have helped pay it off quicker if we could have done that. I wanna be sure I give you good legal advice here. I think, the statute that deals with, the conflict of interest, specifically with regard to the Local Development Act, is found in section 857. It says, if any member of the governing body of a city, town, or county, which is in the process of adopting a project plan for a district, or which has adopted such a plan pursuant to the provisions of the Local Development Act, or if any member of the governing body of a taxing entity within the boundaries of a district, or any person who is a member of the immediate family of such member owns or controls a financial interest, direct or indirect, in any property in any project area to be acquired or developed with public financial assistance, said member shall disclose the same in writing to the clerk of the city, town, or county, with such disclosure entered into the minutes of the governing body. Any such member with any interest of 10% or more, or any such member with an immediate family member with any interest of 10% or more, shall be ineligible to vote on any matter or transaction pertaining to such property, and shall refrain from taking any other official action related to such property. This section shall not preclude acquisition of a residence, acquisition of any property after issuance of a certificate of completion or agreement to develop in accordance with the objectives of such project plan, provided such member discloses any actual or prospective interest and does not participate in any official action approving such agreement. For purposes of this act, unless otherwise provided, any matter requiring a vote by the governing body of a city, town, or county, or a governing body of a taxing entity within the district shall be a majority of those eligible to vote. This section doesn't directly address what we're talking about, but it's the only guidance we have in the Local Development Act. There are some conflict of interest sections in the Public Trust Act, which govern the Logan County Public Works Authority, and of course there's a constitutional provision with regard to conflicts of interest. I think your common sense tells you that these gentlemen probably have some qualms about, or should have some qualms about
Absolutely.
participating in this exercise, even though it's not technically described as a conflict of interest in the Local Development Act. So.
Dan, with what you read, it brings me to the question, because I don't think it is, but if I have a school board member that owns land in there, they are a governing body of a taxing entity, or is the county a taxing entity?
No, the school district is the tax entity.
So where's Terry Penrose place?
Oh, he's way up, 33 in post.
He's up by
post.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Let me
we're
address.
good.
Yeah, I knew it was somewhere in there, but I wasn't
Yeah.
sure.
Let me address Dr. Simpson's point, because the statute is a little misleading there. Under the Local Development Act, we have two kinds of districts. We have increment districts, which is what we're talking about here, and then we have something called an incentive district. An incentive district is a tax abatement district, just another name for a tax abatement district. Under the Local Development Act provisions, an incentive district can't be put into place unless the governing body of each taxing entity whose taxes are going to be affected agrees to it. So if we were doing an incentive district, not only would we get together as a review committee, but we would take the project plan to each taxing entity's board. We take it to your board, and each board would have to vote yes or no on whether they wanted their taxes to be included. So I think when you read that conflict of interest provision, I think they're talking about incentive districts. Increment districts won't be taken to your board for approval.
And I knew that. I was thinking about making sure that Terry wasn't in there, because I didn't know for sure.
Yeah, no, I don't mean that we should all have to go back and talk to our boards and find out where everybody owns property, because that's not what it means in this context. So, would it be fair then to just, for purposes of our discussion today, assume that we're talking about a district that runs up and down Midwest Boulevard and doesn't include the Northwest Quarter? Is that?
According to our original last meeting, do we want to just keep it to that same boundary?
Yes, that would be my preference, since that's what this group decided last time.
Okay.
Well, with that change then, are there any other questions regarding the project plan?
Like I say, it doesn't change any of the numbers.
No, sir. Mr. Chairman, that's the presentation on the project plan. Thank you.
Very good.
Are you ready for a motion to accept?
Number 4, consideration possible action regarding a resolution adopting recommendations and findings with regard to the formation of Increment District Number 1, Logan County, Oklahoma, Eastside Commercial Increment District, and its related project plan and containing other provisions relating thereto.
And that would, of course, be the district that is
bordered on the east side by Midwest or the Camp Russell Road.
I would move approval of the plan as presented with the modifications to reflect the East District being the Midwest Boulevard.
So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those saying nay. And that resolution is approved.
Was that, I want to make sure I understood, was that your motion to approve the resolution?
Correct.
So, okay.
The resolution as it was originally stated.
As amending the
here.
boundaries to I-35 to the west,
Okay.
Midwest Boulevard to the east, College to the north, University to the south. Is that correct?
The college to the north, it would not be correct, because it has to go up to the ODOT yard, which has been annexed by Guthrie.
Okay, so the map I'm looking at that went to college isn't correct?
It's actually right. Goes up
Yeah,
right here.
it's
ODOT
correct.
owns
It's
this,
just
and that's
south
city
of the
limits.
ODOT
So
yard.
it's just south of the ODOT yard. And
Okay, so we're
The
taking,
only
because this is
change
coming
is
out,
the-
okay.
The only change, Troy, is the
Just draw
eastern
that line,
boundary.
yeah, draw that
We
line
just
straight
moved
up.
the eastern boundary of that.
Okay.
Everything
Right.
else stays the same.
Thank you.
I asked that question because I think we're not on the same page here. It sounded like your motion was to approve the project plan with the revised boundaries. That is a different
Document than the
document
resolution.
than the resolution, so I want to make sure that, I know.
Project.
Yeah. And Troy had it right, except for that one little.
So now do we need a motion to accept the resolution?
Well, you might enjoy some discussion on it first. At least I enjoy giving you some explanation on it first.
Okay.
Does everybody have a copy of it?
I just want to point out that if you look at your agenda, and this is what Dan supplied to us, there was not action requested on the plan. It was just a discussion. The only action item is the resolution that will put the plan in place.
Okay. I see.
Then that's my error.
And no, I would treat that as just a procedural motion for purposes of the discussion.
Okay.
The resolution actually has language that adopts the project plan. So I think we could treat it as a
Okay.
procedural issue, and certainly not every procedural issue gets posted on the agenda. But let me give you a brief explanation of the resolution, because the resolution is just simply a format that I have used in the past. It's not a requirement. I want to make sure you all understand this is not the way the statute tells you you have to do it. The statute doesn't tell you you have to do it in any particular way. But a format like this that's written in the alternative, and you'll notice starting on page 2, there's some bold language, some do's and do nots, and R's and are nots, and it's not my job to tell you what your findings should be. I'm simply offering this resolution format as a way that I've found it convenient for review committees to do their work in the past. And so when we're doing this findings resolution, we need to make sure that the review committee expresses its desire with regard to those alternatives. I'd be happy to run through this and explain a little bit of the meaning behind this. Let's start on section 1. This is the requirement by the statute that you all find whether or not the increment district qualifies as a threshold basis. The statute has 3 ways for a district to be eligible for an increment district. 1 is something called reinvestment area. 2, any area that's been designated as an enterprise zone under the Oklahoma statutes is eligible per se. And then 3, any historic preservation area is eligible. Well, we don't have the historic preservation opportunity here. I'm not sure this is an enterprise zone, so I have approached this as being an area that qualifies as a reinvestment area. And reinvestment area for purposes defined in Section 853 of the Local Development Act as an area that requires public improvements to reverse economic stagnation or decline, to serve as a catalyst for retaining or expanding employment, to attract major investment in the area, or to preserve or enhance the tax base, or in which 50% or more of the structures in the area have an age of 35 years or more. Now this is done in the disjunctive. Any one of those tests would be sufficient to qualify it as a reinvestment area. In my mind, these public improvements are necessary for just about every one of these purposes: to reverse economic stagnation or decline, to serve as a catalyst for retaining or expanding employment, to attract major area or major investment in the area, or to preserve or enhance the tax base. I think you could argue that any one of those and all of those are met by the Love's proposal. But that's your call, not my call. But if you do agree that it meets the test, then what we would ask you to do is simply express it as saying that the boundaries of the proposed east side commercial increment district do define an area that qualifies as a reinvestment area due to the fact that this area is an area requiring et cetera, et cetera. Therefore, the proposed district is eligible for designation as a tax increment district. Does everybody understand what our approach has been in drafting this format? You have alternatives, and it's up to you to tell me which one of those alternatives makes sense. If you believe the wording in any regard is inaccurate, you should feel free to supply your own wording for this resolution. As I say, this is not something, you don't have to do it this way. It's simply a way that I have found in past exercises to be a convenient way to address all of the issues that the statute asks you to address. Then in Section 2, there is a list of guidelines. These are legislative guidelines that are found in Section 852 of the Local Development Act. Section 1 and 2 arguably describe the but-for test. Number 1 says that investment, development, and economic growth are difficult within the boundaries of the proposed district, but possible if the tax increment financing provisions of the Local Development Act are available. 2, that the East Side Commercial Increment District does not encompass an area where investment, development, and economic growth would occur without the assistance of public funds. 3, that the undertaking of the projects described in the project plan will not supplant or replace normal public functions and services. That the purpose set forth in the project plan does not conflict with comprehensive plan of any planning commission having jurisdiction thereof. And I think you told me last time we don't have a county planning function out there.
No, we don't have a zoning.
Okay.
Planning.
5, that the East Side Commercial Increment District does not have boundaries that dissect a similar area and does not create an unfair competitive advantage. 6, that the project contemplates the need for residential neighborhood treatments as well as commercial and industrial development. 7, the maximum effort has been made to allow full public knowledge and participation in the use of the Local Development Act in connection with and the preparation and adoption of the project plan. 8, that the project plan contemplates the conservation, preservation, and rehabilitation of existing improvements within the district, that demolition, clearance, and relocation is minimized. 9, the project plan, upon adoption by the governing body, develops and applies clear standards, criteria, and threshold limits that are applicable to all similar property in areas that the project plan contains, protections against nearby relocations to utilize incentives. B goes on with a number of findings that are required by the statute, that the projects in the project plan will enhance or will not enhance the value of other real property located. C finds that the aggregate net assessed value of all taxable property in all increment districts does not exceed 25% the total net assessed value of taxable property within Logan County. D is the same, that the aggregate net assessed value of the taxable property in all increment districts does not exceed 25% of the total net assessed value of any affected school districts located within Logan County. And then E, that all increment districts do not exceed 25% of the total land area of Logan County. And based on the foregoing, the review committee finds the project plan and the projects therein are appropriate under the provisions of the Local Development Act, and the approval of the project plan is or is not recommended. Section 3 deals with the findings that the financial impact on the districts. This is sometimes a more complicated discussion to have. Hopefully, it's a little more straightforward. First off, in Section 3A is the finding that dedicating ad valorem taxes to the East Side Commercial Income District portion of the fund for 7 years is desirable to meet those tests that I described earlier: reverse economic stagnation, or serve as a catalyst, or attract major investment, or preserve and enhance, and that these investments will eventually increase in substantial increased ad valorem tax revenue to the taxing entities at the completion of the project plan. Section B is a different kind of format, and let me explain what we do in Section B. We take the spreadsheet that had the debt service requirements, and we look and we identify the maximum annual debt service requirement, which in this case I believe is $42,000. And then we look at the total, the cumulative debt service number. And we take the millage rates that are levied by each of the taxing jurisdictions, and we do a pro rata calculation of those two numbers. In other words, we take how much the school district levies as a percentage of the overall millage levy, and then we apply that percentage to both the maximum annual and the cumulative debt service numbers, to give you an idea of how much each of those taxes contributes to the debt service, either the largest annual debt service number or the cumulative number. So in this Section B, you'll see two numbers besides each of the taxing entities. In the first one, Logan County's levies 10.24 mil as a percentage or a portion of the cumulative, or excuse me, the max annual debt service number of 42,000. That 10.24 mils equals $6,308.56 of that max annual. In other words, in any 1 year, the county's 10.24 would result in no more than the $6,300 number. And similarly, with regard to the cumulative debt service figure, the county's 10.24 mil, 33,000 of that cumulative 217,000 is represented by the county's 10.24 mil. That's what the county's millage would generate over the life of the district. Now, that is not the same thing as saying it will cost the county $6,300 or cost the county $33,000. And let me explain why that is. Think back about our discussions of the but-for test. If the but-for test is met, we would not have the new private improvements or private investment taking place. So the county would not be able to levy 10.24 mils against that new private investment because it wouldn't occur. It wouldn't occur because there's not the infrastructure that's required. And I think probably in more than any community I've seen, this situation shows us that that's true. We just have not seen in 30 years any development along the east side of I-35 because we don't have the infrastructure there. And that's exactly what the Local Development Act, in my opinion, is trying to do, is to make sure that we have the public infrastructure we need to keep up with the private investment and the demand for improvements that we see in many of our communities. So I think you can make a real good case for the but-for test in this instance. If the but-for test is met, then again, Commissioner, you don't have the new $5 to $7 million being invested because you don't have the infrastructure. But with that infrastructure, you do have the ability to attract that kind of investment. So but for the use of a tax increment financing to help defray the costs of that infrastructure, you wouldn't have the ability to generate the new ad valorem taxes. That is the traditional but-for test analysis, and in Oklahoma we have those two sections, those two guidelines that I just read from section 2.1 and 2 that are really an expansion on that idea, but that's the idea. If but-for test is met, in other words, you have a situation where let's say in downtown Oklahoma City you have a situation where somebody decides to build a 60-story office building, and it's going to be $800 million, and they say, we don't need any public assistance, we just want to, we need this for our company and we're going to do it. And then after the fact, the city of Oklahoma City comes in and says, well, let's do a TIF district, and let's go figure out a way to spend all this TIF money. Is the but-for test met there? And I'd suggest to you it may not be, because the company has already made an investment decision. There's nothing that is being needed by the company. They don't need a new sewer line. The sewer, the streets, water, everything is right there in downtown Oklahoma City. But it's simply the city of Oklahoma City using the new revenues and spending them for other public needs. Now that's a hypothetical situation, you understand. I'm not pointing any fingers. But in that case, would the but-for test be met? And if not, would the schools, Mr. Superintendent, would the schools think that that money was already in the pipeline and headed in their direction and now being redirected? So is there a cost to the taxing entities in that situation, in that hypothetical situation? And I would argue yes, that if the but-for test is not met, those taxing entities would have received those new revenues, because there's nothing we're doing with the TIF revenues that's making that project more or less likely to happen. So that's the explanation on the but-for test, and I hope that it helps you as you read through the remaining provisions understand why we say in section 3B at the end of each of those discussions, however, because substantially all of the incremental revenues generated from this new private investment would have occurred without the construction of the projects listed in the project plan, no significant adverse financial impact on Meridian Technology Center's general fund is expected. That's what that language is intended to mean. It's a conclusion that there's no financial impact because the but-for test is met. However, because substantially all of the incremental general fund revenues generated from this new private investment would not have occurred without the construction of the projects listed in the project plan. Would Loves have built out there if they didn't have sewer? I don't believe they would have. You saw a convenience store do that with septics, but I don't believe Loves had the option to do that on a septic system. So they needed those projects. If they didn't have those projects, I doubt that they would be able to do their new truck stop. So that's what the resolution language, it seems a little obscure, a little hard to discern, but that's what it's intended to recite. In each case, we try to define how much, we try to quantify for the taxing entities how much of their millage is going to be reflected. In other words, what's the contribution that the millage is making. But that's not to say that each taxing entity it's gonna cost them that much money, because if the but-for test is met, the revenue wouldn't be there anyway. Now, sometimes it takes us a while to wrap our heads around that thought, so are there any questions about?
I don't know, I do know that there's other infrastructure going on, you know, that would go on if that pipeline is under there, but is Buzz pretty well committed to already putting a pipeline in there? And but for, you're saying that it does meet the but for. I'm not quite understanding with Buzz already saying, hey, we're gonna build that sucker. Where's, I just, that but for just kinda, please can stop.
Well, let's think about that for a second, because we have had a number of discussions with Love's for the past 6 months, and I know the city has had those discussions as well. Now, I don't think anybody signed an agreement with Love's, but was Love's justified in proceeding with their project based on the assurances that the city and the county have made thus far? And I think Love's might say yes. Now, would they have been willing to do it without those assurances? That's a better question.
Yeah.
And what we frequently find in this kind of an exercise is that the question of would they have done this without it is, it's almost metaphysical. You know, unless you're sitting in the boardroom of Love's convenience stores, or you have access to the mind of the CEO, can you really answer that question definitively? And I find that I can't. I find that you have to take developers and companies at their word when they say, we're not going to go here if there's not these improvements. So, I can't answer it to my satisfaction.
They
I
could
may not
sit
answer
on
it
that
to
piece
yours.
of property. Love's has got tons of money. They could sit on that property forever until a government entity decides that it wants to put a pipe underneath there. In the meantime, what is that? Anwar's talking about 80 or 90,000 to put that pipe under 33. And if he does that, he's going to put a hotel or other infrastructure to that direction. So he's not going to do that until somebody puts a pipe under I-35. So we do have that but for on a lot of the district, I believe. Am
I think that's
going
right.
the right direction
I
on
think
that?
that's exactly right. Eventually, you're going to have that pipeline under there. You could test our theory. You could decide that the city and the county could decide they don't want to cooperate and they don't want to give Love's any and back up on them, and then see if Love's goes forward with it. Love's has a lot of money. They may or may not decide to go forward. If they don't go forward, that would answer the question for us.
Yeah.
But I don't
So do
suggest
we
we go
wanna-
to quite that extreme to find out. I think as an act of good faith, the city and county have said, we will help you if it's legal and if our finances make it affordable. Love's is going to be contributing, I think, incremental sales tax dollars, even though it may not be called that for the city when the city annexes it. I think within a few years, each of the taxing entities will benefit greatly from this kind of an investment by Love's. And I think there will be a lot of new investment on the east side of I-35 within the coming years, which will accrue to the benefit of the school district and all of the taxing entities.
And you talked about changing wording in here, and I guess as I look at the wording, I'm not sure it captures what was just said, and that is the fact that, yes, this project we're talking about right now directly benefits Lowe's. But the future benefit that we see out of this project is that that pipeline will be available into, which will allow them to develop property there that, but for this sewer line, they probably wouldn't have developed. And so I guess, how do we capture that essence in the
Well,
in the resolution?
I've not tried to come up with much more than just what the statutory requirements for your findings reflect. And I've used the statutory language in many places as I can. And that's why somebody's English teacher would criticize the wording. Some of the statutory provisions are not well drafted, but
I didn't get a red pen in it.
well, I appreciate that. Just don't show it to anybody else. B on section 2 says the review committee further finds that contemplated private and public projects described in the project plan will enhance the value of other real property located within the East Side Commercial Increment District, as well as effectuating the increase of employment opportunities within said East Side Commercial Increment District. That's as close to the statutory formulation to your concern as they get. And hopefully that does include just what you said, that this project is going to benefit others.
It will benefit Love's and others who decide to develop East Guthrie. And I guess that's, as I look at the project, would Love's do it with or without us? In my mind, probably. But the other development in that area might not occur without this project. So Love's is providing us with an opportunity to make that investment.
If you have some language you would like to include, I'm happy to include.
Well, and maybe it doesn't have to necessarily be in the resolution, but maybe in the minutes of the meeting, that we're not solely providing benefit to us.
Right.
We're providing a benefit to Logan County by making land that doesn't have access to city sewer, giving it access, which makes it more developable.
And to Doug's point, when this first came about, the first thing I did was I looked at what the assessed value of the property was and balancing that with what they provide the school district, but also being realistic in a common sense fashion about commercial development on the east side of I-35 is severely limited without as to the type of commercial development without sanitary sewer lines. And the two things that are the greatest benefit to the school district are commercial or industrial development because they do not require more desks for students.
More buses.
And so that being, from my perspective, that was the thing that probably pushed me over the line on saying this is a good thing because it will spur, but the chances of it spurring commercial or industrial growth without those sanitary sewer lines is minimal, in my opinion. And those kinds of things have, in 2 years of living in this community, I've noticed that they have severely limited the growth of those areas, of the commercial and industrial because of the lack of sanitary sewer.
Let me ask this: is anyone would anyone like to defend the non-but-for side of this? Is there a disagreement on the committee with that? If there's not, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to suggest how you go about filling out the rest of this. With your permission, let me suggest that starting on page 2 at the top of the page, that should read, whereas the proposed district is eligible for designation as an increment district, the next whereas the project plan does contemplate the funding of both essential public improvements and development financing assistance, and whereas it is more likely than not that the private investment would not occur without the public improvements specified in section 1. On section 1, I would suggest that read that the boundaries do define an area that qualifies as a reinvestment area due to the fact that this area is an area requiring public improvements. Therefore, the proposed district is eligible for designation as a tax increment district. With regard to section 2, I would suggest the language read, the review committee hereby finds that the provisions of the project plan do meet the following legislative guidelines. Paragraph B, the review committee further finds that the contemplated private and public projects will enhance the value of other real property located within the district. C, the review committee further finds that the aggregate net assessed value of all taxable property in Logan County does not exceed 25% of the total net assessed value. D, the review committee hereby finds that the aggregate net assessed value of taxable property in all increment districts in Logan County does not exceed 25% of the total assessed net value of any affected school district. E, the review committee further finds that the land area of all increment districts in Logan County does not exceed 25% of the total land area. And based on the foregoing, the review committee finds the project plan and the projects therein are appropriate under the provisions of the Local Development Act, and approval of the project plan by the governing body is hereby recommended. Under section 3A, the committee also finds that dedicating ad valorem to the east side commercial increment district apportionment fund for 7 years is desirable to reverse economic stagnation, etc., etc. These investments will thereby eventually result in substantial increased ad valorem tax revenues. Then with regard to section 3B, Logan County General Fund, that because substantially all of the incremental general fund revenues generated from this new private investment would not have occurred without the construction of the projects, no significant adverse financial impact on the county general fund is expected. However, because, and then on section 2, or paragraph 2, general fund revenues for Meridian Technology Center, again, because all of this incremental general fund revenues would not have occurred or accrued, that's where it should be.
So you got it two different ways there, so.
Accrued, no significant financial impact. Same with regard to the building fund. Then on the health department, that those building fund revenues, or excuse me, general fund revenues would not have accrued without the construction of the projects listed, no significant financial impact. Very same for the Emergency Medical Services District, because all of those revenues would not have accrued without the construction. No significant financial impact.
Dan, can I interrupt you
You
for a
bet.
moment? Just for clarification, where you've got for Logan County Emergency Medical Services District, we actually have 3 that are part of Logan County. They are actually District 1, so
Okay.
we might want to clarify.
Okay, good, yeah. Put that in there. The public schools have a much more complicated funding system than the rest of the taxing entities. And for that reason, we've tried to provide language that describes those complexities. I won't say that we have done this in the clearest possible way, because it's a very complicated system. when you start talking about the school state aid formula. I am not an expert in that, and I don't know who is, but whoever is, they're very, very smart people, because it's tinkered with by the legislature almost every session, and it has a number of exceptions and qualifications that I just simply, I can't grasp. My understanding of it is pretty basic, and that is that on the operating side, on the general fund side, we try to spend about the same number of dollars per student in Oklahoma, whether they live in the richest school district or the poorest school district in the state. And that's the idea behind equalization, and the state aid formula is the tool that provides that equalization. That is not true on the capital side. Some school districts have much more resources when it comes to the capital side of things. They have the ability to levy building fund revenue. Not all school districts can. Not all school districts get the full millage. More importantly, some school districts, my own hometown of Altus, they refuse to issue any GO bonds for the school district down there. And that's been true the last 50 years, I think. They just don't do it. And so you'll see the sinking fund millage for the Altus Public School District is 0. Some school districts are able to keep that pretty high. Some school districts have 18, 20, gosh, they're making some school districts with more millage than that.
Mid-30s.
Mid-30s. So it varies, and there's no way that I know of to equalize that. So we want to try to describe the effect of this district on those different funding sources. The school's building fund works pretty much like everybody else's. It is a straightforward levy. They get originally 5 mills, it's now 5.12 mills applied against the tax base, and it's a straightforward calculation. So we do put the building fund impact or contribution numbers in here, and that language looks the same as the language for the other tax initiatives. Sinking fund revenues are those revenues that are levied to pay off GO bonds issued by the district upon approval by 60% of the patrons or the voters of the district. It is a backwards calculation. It is not straightforward. In other words, we look to see how much debt service we have for those bonds in any one year, and then we divide that into the tax base, and that gives us the number of mills that we have to levy. So it's not a fixed number of mills, it's a millage that's based on the debt service amount and the tax base, and it could vary every year. A tax increment district, the statute says that in a tax increment district, we use the base assessment for purposes of determining that sinking fund millage. So you could argue that the millage is slightly greater because of the tax increment district. However, we don't think in most cases it prevents the school district from being able to meet their debt service obligations. They can't levy more than what takes to meet their debt service obligations. So once you meet those, that's all the millage you get. And so in terms of financial impact, we don't think the sinking fund millage is usually a problem. Now, you could argue that it's the limitation on it's the 10% limitation on how much you can vote or issue at any point in time, and that may at some point in time be a point that we need to discuss. But sinking fund usually it is not impacted by a tax increment district. The general fund side of it is more complicated because We do get state aid revenues that go to the Guthrie Public Schools for the general fund, for the operations side. That has been not increasing at the rate. I mean, that's a function of legislative grace, and that has not been increasing at a rate every year that it should be. And frequently we're finding that sacrifices have to be made in the operating budgets of a lot of public schools. They can't do as much because the legislature simply isn't funding that state aid formula or that state aid fund like they should be. But the statute makes clear that in an increment district, the base assessment is used to determine how much of the local resources are being raised. If there were no tax increment district here, you could argue that the local resources would go up, but keep in mind the state resources then go down. The more money you raise locally, the less that comes from the state and vice versa. It's not a dollar for dollar offset, but it may be something like 96 or 97 cents on the dollar offset. There are peculiarities in that formula that make it hard to say it's a dollar for dollar offset. But when we did the math for the Tulsa Public Schools a few years ago, it was a 98-cent to a dollar offset. So we don't think that TIF districts really impact the general fund side of school districts unless you're putting a lot of new kiddos in the school district. And if you're causing the school district to have to hire more teachers because of the project, then arguably there is an impact. If they're having to build more school buildings, there's a big impact that's not being offset by the state aid formula. So it's a very complicated thing, and I hate to try to describe it in as short few words as we do, but that's what that discussion is intending to reflect, is that the state aid formula for the most part will make up for any dollars that may be lost by the general fund of the district without regard to the but-for test. And so that's why we have that discussion. Now, Doug, see what you would have missed if you just gone ahead and approved the resolution.
You wouldn't have got to earn your money.
I wouldn't have gotten to earn my money. But that's what we would suggest in terms of the wording on the resolution. And finally, with regard to the building fund, we would suggest that language read the same as for the other tax initiatives.
You want me to give you a grade on explanation of school fund?
Oh, I'd hate to hear that.
Wasn't bad.
I'd hate to hear that. Let me say I've been in 30-something review committees, and I've been criticized by the superintendents in my presentation many times in the past. So
No criticism.
You've been home.
I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to get better.
And I'm not afraid to criticize.
Okay, Doug.
So now it's appropriate for a motion to accept the resolution with the wording as you
And,
suggested.
but also note on Exhibit A the changes
Yes.
to the boundaries.
Yes, sir.
Present that motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Whether we are in favor of or not.
Accepting this resolution.
The resolution.
Regarding the formation of the increment district. What we're doing actually right now is we are forming up the district. Now, I did have one question. Do we now still have to take it back to our boards for approval?
No, sir. As we discussed earlier, increment districts do not have to be approved by the governing bodies of the taxing agencies. Of course, the county commissioners have to approve it.
I see.
But in all that you're doing, this resolution is going to the county commissioners. It's your recommendations. You're not officially doing anything with regard to the district. These are just your recommendations.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
All right.
Just further clarification, if the county commissioners want to change it in any way, they can do that.
Well, let's talk about that, because I don't know that we've ever focused on that. Go back to the project plan. This is what I refer to as an exercise in parameters. What we're really doing is can change, the project plan gives the Logan County Public Works Authority the authority to amend this project plan on its own, unless it's considered, if it's not a minor amendment, I should say, they can amend it if it's a minor amendment. And the statute says what a minor amendment is, and it's spelled out on page 9 under section 9. A minor amendment, it's considered minor if such amendment does not change the character or purpose of the project plan, does not affect more than 5% of the district's area, or does not affect more than 5% of the public cost of the plan to be financed by a portion tax increment, all as determined on a cumulative basis. Which means if we come back next year and instead of 5%, we get a 4% interest rate, the Public Works Authority can amend this project plan and reduce the numbers, change the $37,000 interest cost to whatever would be appropriate at that point. If it's more than 5% on the upside, however, the Public Works Authority could not do it on its own. It would have to take it back to this body and then back to the commissioners. And so what you're really doing is you're setting parameters on the size of the district, on the character and purpose of the district, and on the dollars that can be captured through the district. We can make the district smaller, we can go down on the numbers without going back to the review committee, but we can't go up. We can't make the district bigger by more than 5% or more expensive by more than 5% without this body coming back together and giving you recommendations.
So this stays a formed body till the end of till it's all paid and done. So if we had members come or go or make changes or anything over the course of this 5 or 6 year period, what happens?
The resolution that the commissioners adopted, I think, deals with the terms of the members of the board. And consistent with the provisions in that resolution, this body could get back together at any time. And that's why we do a resolution for the commissioners, because the statute doesn't address things like this. And we want to try to give some guidance in that regard, so we know what we need to do when that, or if that eventuality occurs.
Okay, let's just as a happenstance, because I could see it happen over the course of 5 or 6 years. Jeff decides, I don't want to be tied even loosely to this commitment, so here's my resignation, take me off. Do we go ahead and find a member replacement then, or wait until we need them down the road?
Wait until you need them. I think the resolution said 1 year is their term, so.
Some of us are here just because of position.
Exactly.
Because I don't plan to be here for 5 or 6 years.
Right, but your replacement inherits the job, yeah.
And normally, we feel comfortable calling you back within a year to address any questions that come up. But beyond a year, we'd likely go back through the formation process again and get everybody appointed again.
Year's okay, 5 or 6.
That makes sense. A lot of early days. Okay. So we have a motion, a second, and it's passed. All right. So we're on to number 6.
I'm sorry, was there a roll call? I need a roll call on that.
Do we need a roll call?
We need a roll call.
Yeah, dang names then.
My wife. Pearson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Nath,
Here.
I need your vote on this resolution.
Yes.
Yes.
Chapel,
Present, yes.
Simpson,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Major.
Yes.
Motion carries all ayes.
Thank you. Okay, now we're on to number 6, consideration of possible action on.
Before we
Oh,
go there,
okay.
and I know it wasn't on here, but
Okay.
that's because his email didn't indicate, do we need another meeting of this board for any reason, or do we need just at a later time and notice? Okay.
Move that we adjourn.
We'll have a roll call. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, let me thank all the members of the committee for your time and effort and energy. We spent a lot of time on this, and I think we've got a good result, so thank you very much.
I'd also like to congratulate this committee. Thank you so much for serving. And I think you've been really diligent about it. Thanks.
Dan, do you have a copy of the resolution you'd like?
Yes.
Oh, for your work.
The resolution itself. Is that one of those final, you emailed that, right? What we worked on.
Dr. Simpson, can I grab you for a couple of minutes?
Certainly.
Jeff Chapel, good work. Okay, nice to meet you, Mark.
Good to meet you.
Well, yeah, I'm very cautious about it. Yes, sir. Thanks, sir.
Any documentation?
I've already spoken.
Okay.
It's MC.
You're right, you need to be careful about them. Some people like to use this a little too loose.
Yeah.
And what's your?
Is the city gonna have an easement to get to that sewer?
Thanks, sir.
Well, I'm sorry about that. Nice meeting you. Amendment I was trying to do, but you're right. I mean, I wondered about leasing. Yeah. For the county. I wondered if we did have to have a meeting if we did.
So I invite you to.
Okay. That's all. Well, I was attending all day and that.
Good, good. Real helpful. Yeah, I just got a little small business here.
I will.
Main Street. I used to, I've been over here 15 years.
I'm pretty arguing.
I was over in the only pizza place we had.
More entities that we could collect.
I'm really excited when that opens.
Spread out and more beneficial, everybody understands. And that's perception is what I'm working on.
We always make sure that we get
This guy had cards.
Oh,
Yeah, the city cafe, yeah. I remember, I was in town when that thing was so nice meeting you.
I think that whole family is my minister, all attorneys or doctors or someone else.